October 12, 1952. 38,000 feet above the Yalu River. The silence of the stratosphere was a lie. Up here, where the sky turned a dark, bruising purple, it looked peaceful. But Captain Elias Preacher Thorne knew better. The air was thin, the cold was lethal, and somewhere in the sun's glare, death was waiting. Preacher adjusted his oxygen mask, the rubber digging into his sweat-slicked skin. He flew the F-86F Sabre, a gleaming silver dart named Sunday Punch. "Check in, flight," Preacher's voice rasped over the radio. "2 is good," replied Lieutenant Kid Miller, his wingman. Miller was 19. He flew smooth, but he talked too much. "3 is good. 4 is clear." They were Hunter Flight, patrolling the edge of Mig Alley. Their job was simple: dangle themselves as bait. Wait for the Soviet MiGs to cross the river from their sanctuary in China, and then spring the trap. But today, the hunters were about to become the prey. The shadow in the sun. "Preacher, I got a reflection at 12 o'clock high." Miller's voice rose an octave. "Way up there. Angels 45. Preacher squinted. The F-86 was a beautiful machine, but it struggled above 40,000 feet. The Russian-built MiG-15s, however, could climb like rockets and sit up there all day, looking down like vultures. "I see 'em," Preacher muttered. "Contrails. 4 of them." Then, the radar warning receiver didn't just beep. It screamed. "Break right! Break right!" Preacher yelled. The sky fell apart. It wasn't 4 MiGs. It was 12. A train of enemy fighters had been hiding in the contrails of the first group. They dove on the Americans with the sun at their backs, their 37mm cannons spitting massive, glowing slugs of destruction. Thump, thump, thump. Explosions rocked the formation. Flight 3 disappeared in a ball of fire before he could even call Mayday. "They're all over us," Miller screamed. "I can't shake 'em. Stick with me, kid." Preacher hauled his Sabre into a tight, crushing turn. The G-forces slammed him into his seat. These weren't North Korean rookies. They didn't make mistakes. They flew with brutal, mathematical precision. These were the honchos, Soviet veterans from the Eastern Front, flying in secret markings. They were the best pilots the USSR had to offer. The sacrifice, the dogfight descended into chaos. A swirling furball of aluminum and fire dropping toward the jagged mountains below. Preacher managed to get a snapshot at a MiG crossing his nose. He fired a burst of .50 caliber rounds. Dust puffed off the MiG's wing, but it kept flying. "Preacher, help!" He looked back. Miller had made a fatal error. He had bled off his speed trying to turn too tight. Now he was hanging in the air, a sitting duck. 2 MiGs were lining up behind him, their cannon ports flashing. Preacher didn't think. He reacted. He was 3,000 feet above them. He slammed the throttle forward and shoved the stick into the corner. He didn't dive at the MiGs. He dove in front of them. He deliberately put his own plane between the cannons and the kid. "Get out of there, Miller!" Preacher roared. The Russians saw the new target. A juicier, closer target. They shifted their aim. Tracers whipped past Preacher's canopy like angry hornets. One clipped his vertical stabilizer. The jet shuddered. He had their attention. Now he had to survive it. "Come and get me, Ivan." Preacher gritted his teeth. He pulled back on the stick. Hard. He wanted to pull a high G barrel roll, a maneuver that would force the fast-moving MiGs to overshoot him. It was a desperate move. It required pulling 9 GS for 5 seconds. The human body is built to take about 5 GS. At 9 GS, your blood weighs as much as lead. The blackout. The world turned gray. Preacher grunted, straining every muscle in his abdomen, trying to force blood to his brain. The G-suit inflated, crushing his legs, but it wasn't enough. The gray turned to black. His vision narrowed to a tiny pinprick of light. "Don't pass out. Don't pass out." He heard the engine screaming. He felt the crushing weight of gravity, like an elephant sitting on his chest. The pinprick of light vanished. GLOC. G-force-induced loss of consciousness. Preacher's hands went limp. His head slumped forward, chin hitting his chest. The saber, no longer controlled by a human hand, stopped its violent turn. It leveled out slightly, then entered a shallow, lazy dive. The engine was still running. The plane was still flying. But the pilot was gone. The cat and mouse. Colonel Viktor Volkov, leader of the Soviet 324th Fighter Aviation Division, watched the American plane level out. He was confused. The American had been flying like a demon seconds ago. Now he was drifting, straight and slow. "Is he dead?" Volkov asked in Russian over the radio. "I hit his tail." His wingman, Lieutenant Yuri, replied. "Maybe I killed the pilot?" Volkov pulled his MiG-15 alongside the drifting saber. They were descending through 15,000 feet now. He peered into the cockpit of the American jet. He was close enough to see the rivets. He saw the pilot. The American's head was down. He wasn't moving. The oxygen mask hung loose. "He is asleep," Volkov laughed. Cold, cruel sound. "The coward passed out." "Should I finish him?" Yuri asked. Volkov considered it. The American plane was helpless. A tomb falling from the sky. "No," Volkov said. "Not yet. Let us have some fun." The Russians knew they were safe. The other Americans had scattered. It was just them and the sleeping pilot. Volkov flew slightly ahead of the saber and dipped his wing, sending a turbulent wash of jet wash over the American plane. The saber rocked violently. Preacher's head bobbed like a ragdoll, but he didn't wake up. "Look at him," Volkov sneered. "The great American ace, sleeping like a baby while we decide his fate." They circled the drifting plane like sharks. They did barrel rolls around it. They practiced their aiming runs, locking their sights on the cockpit, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the pilot into pink mist. "He is dead already," Yuri said. "Let us send him to hell." "Agreed," Volkov said. "Target practice. I will take the left wing. You take the right. On my mark." The two MiGs drifted back. They slowed down, matching the speed of the gliding saber. They slotted into position, 50 yards behind. Point-blank range. 3. Volkov counted down. His thumb rested on the red trigger of his 37mm cannon. 2. Inside the cockpit of Sunday Punch, the radar warning receiver was blaring a flat, constant tone. "Lock on, lock on, lock on." But Preacher was miles away. He was dreaming of a cornfield in Nebraska. He was dreaming of silence. 1. The awakening. It wasn't the noise that woke him. It was the survival instinct. The lizard brain that lives at the base of the skull, millions of years old, sensing a predator. Preacher's eyes snapped open. He didn't gasp. He didn't panic. He went from 0 to 100 in a microsecond. His vision was blurry, but he saw the mirror. 2 silver shapes behind him. Huge. Close. He saw the cannon muzzles flare. Action. The logical part of his brain said, "You are dead." The pilot part of his brain said, "Not today." Preacher didn't pull up. That's what they expected. He slammed the rudder pedal to the floor and chopped the throttle to idle. The saber entered a violent skid, snapping sideways like a car drifting on ice. The miss. Volkov fired. Yuri fired. Massive cannon shells tore through the space where the saber should have been. But the saber wasn't there. It was 30 feet to the left, sliding through the air in a way airplanes aren't supposed to slide. The shells missed the cockpit by inches. The shockwave rattled Preacher's teeth. "What?" Volkov screamed in Russian. "He is awake." Preacher slammed the throttle back to full power. The afterburner didn't exist on these planes, but the engine roared as it gulped fuel. "Surprise, boys," Preacher whispered. His voice was raspy, dry as sandpaper. "I'm up." He hauled the stick back. The saber, now slower than the MiGs because of the skid, dropped behind them. The hunters had overshot. The dead man was behind them, and he was very, very awake. The switch. In air combat, the difference between hunter and prey is measured in seconds. Colonel Volkov and Lieutenant Yuri had spent 10 seconds laughing. They had spent 5 seconds aiming. They had spent 3 seconds drifting into the perfect kill position. They had wasted 18 seconds. Now they were paying the price. Preacher's saber was screaming. The J-47 engine was pushed beyond its limits, the exhaust gas temperature gauge redlining. He was right in the saddle, the kill zone directly behind the two Soviet jets. His head was still throbbing from the GLOC. His vision had a fuzzy edge, like looking through dirty glass. But his hands were steady. They were the hands of a surgeon about to cut out a tumor. "You wanted to wake me up?" Preacher whispered, his thumb resting on the electrical firing button. "Well, I'm up." Target 1, the wingman. Lieutenant Yuri was the first to realize the mistake. He looked in his rearview mirror and saw the impossible. The dead American plane wasn't falling. It was growing. The silver nose intake was expanding rapidly in his mirror, like the mouth of a shark coming to swallow him. "Brake, Colonel! Brake!" Yuri screamed in Russian. Too late. Preacher didn't bother with the radar gun sight. At this range, less than 200 yards, he could throw a rock and hit them. He squeezed the trigger. Brrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr saber unleashed a torrent of incendiary blue tracers. The stream of lead didn't just hit Yuri's MiG. It consumed it. The bullets sawed through the MiG's high T-tail. They punched through the aluminum skin of the fuselage. They pierced the fuel tank behind the cockpit. There was no explosion at first. Just a spray of fuel like a mist of blood. Then, a spark. The MiG-15 turned into a fireball. It disintegrated so violently that Preacher had to jerk his stick to the left to avoid flying through the debris. He saw a tire, a piece of wing, and the cockpit canopy tumbling through the air. There was no parachute. "Splash one," Preacher growled. The ace's fear. Colonel Volkov didn't look back. He heard the scream on the radio. He saw the flash of light reflect off his instruments. He knew Yuri was gone. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced Volkov's heart. He was a veteran of Stalingrad. He had shot down 12 German planes and 4 Americans. He didn't fear death, but he feared this. He feared the man who had played dead. He feared the ghost. "You are not dead," Volkov hissed, slamming his throttle forward. "You are a demon." Volkov pulled his MiG into a vertical climb. It was the MiG's greatest advantage. It was lighter than the American Sabre and had a better thrust-to-weight ratio. In a vertical fight, the MiG always won. He rocketed straight up into the dark purple sky, aiming for the safety of 50,000 feet. Preacher watched him go. "Oh no, you don't," Preacher said. "You don't get to run." Preacher pulled the nose up. The heavy Sabre groaned, climbed, but not as fast. The distance between them began to open. 500 yards. 800 yards, 1,000 yards. Volkov was getting away. He was climbing toward the sun, blinding his pursuer. The gamble. Preacher checked his airspeed. 400 knots and dropping. If he kept climbing, he would stall. He would fall backward, and Volkov would come down on top of him and finish the job. He had one shot. A Hail Mary. He had to trade his kinetic energy for a firing solution. Preacher didn't follow Volkov straight up. He cut the corner. He pulled the nose up harder, forcing the plane into a steeper angle, aiming not at where Volkov was, but where he would be in 3 seconds. The stall warning horn began to blare. Beep, beep, beep. The control stick shook in his hands. The Sabre was begging him to stop. "Hold it together, baby," Preacher grunted. "Just give me 1 second." He was looking at empty sky. He was aiming at nothing. He squeezed the trigger. He sprayed a curtain of bullets into the empty air above him. He was painting a wall of lead in Volkov's flight path. The hammer. High above, Volkov was smiling. He checked his mirror. The American was far below, nose pointing up, stalling out. "Stupid American," Volkov muttered. "Gravity is my ally." Then he flew into the wall. He didn't see the bullets. They were moving at 2,800 feet per second. Clank-thwack. The sound was like a hammer hitting a metal bucket. A single .50 caliber armor-piercing round struck the MiG's right wing root. It didn't tear the wing off, but it smashed the hydraulic line for the ailerons. The MiG shuddered. The stick in Volkov's hand jerked violently to the right. I am hit, Volkov shouted. He lost control of the climb. The MiG rolled over on its back and began to dive. He was diving right back down toward Preacher. The knife fight. Preacher had stalled. His nose dropped. He was falling. And then he saw the MiG falling with him. They passed each other canopy to canopy, inverted, falling toward the mountains. Preacher saw Volkov's face. The Russian looked terrified. Now we're playing my game, Preacher said. At lower altitudes, the heavy saber was the king. It was faster in a dive and more stable in a turn. Preacher rolled upright and slotted onto Volkov's tail. The hunt was on. Volkov was fighting a crippled plane. His hydraulics were leaking. His controls were sluggish. But he was still an ace. He used the rudder to skid the MiG, trying to spoil Preacher's aim. They wove through the mountain peaks at 600 miles per hour. It was a high-speed knife fight in a phone booth. I can't shake him, Volkov yelled into his radio. Base, I need assistance. The American is glued to me. Base to Volkov. The controller crackled. Head for the river. Cross the Yalu. He cannot follow you there. It is forbidden. The sanctuary. China. If Volkov crossed the river, he was safe. American rules of engagement strictly prohibited crossing the border. If Preacher followed him, he would be court-martialed. Volkov saw the river ahead. A shimmering ribbon of water. Safety. You cannot touch me there, Volkov grinned. I will make it. The line. Preacher saw the river too. He knew the rules. He knew that if he crossed that line, he might start World War III. He knew his career would be over. He looked at the MiG. This was the man who had laughed at him. This was the man who had tried to execute him while he slept. Preacher, this is Red Leader. The flight commander's voice came over the radio. Do not cross the river. I repeat, do not cross the Yalu. Break off. Preacher looked at the river. He looked at Volkov. He reached down and flipped a switch on his dashboard. Radio master, off. The silence returned to the cockpit. Sorry, boss, Preacher whispered. I can't hear you. Volkov crossed the river. He leveled out over Chinese soil, sighing with relief. He checked his mirror, expecting to see the American turn away. Instead, he saw the silver saber blazing across the border. Afterburners, figuratively, hot. Preacher wasn't turning. He was closing. The final run. Volkov panicked. He is crossing. He is crazy. He is crossing the line. Preacher was 400 yards behind. You think a line on a map is going to save you? Preacher snarled. Not today. He lined up the sights. The radar pipper locked on. A solid red dot on the MiG's fuselage. Preacher squeezed the trigger. Click. Nothing. He squeezed again. Click. Jam! Preacher shouted. He looked at his ammo counters. They weren't jammed. They were empty. He had spent everything on Yuri and the Hail Mary spray. He was flying a 14,000-pound silver glider with no teeth. Volkov realized it too. He saw the American nose dip, then steady, but no fire came. He is empty, Volkov laughed. The fear vanished, replaced by triumph. He followed me into China for nothing. Now the anti-aircraft guns will get him. Below, the Chinese flak batteries were waking up. Black puffs of smoke began to appear around Preacher's plane. Preacher had seconds before he was shot down. He had no ammo. He had an enemy in front of him laughing. He had one option left. It wasn't a maneuver taught in flight school. It wasn't in the manual. It was something he had seen in a bar fight once. If you run out of bullets, use the gun as a club. Preacher pushed the throttle to 100%. He closed the distance. 300 yards. 200 yards. 100 yards. He wasn't trying to shoot. He was trying to hit him. You think you're safe? Preacher yelled, his eyes wild. I'm going to clip your wings. He aimed his right wingtip at the tail of the MiG. Ideally, he would slice the Russian stabilizer off. It was suicide. It was madness. It was the only thing he had left. Volkov saw the saber closing in for a collision. Maniac! Volkov screamed. The Russian ace did the one thing you should never do when low to the ground. He flinched. He yanked his stick hard to the left to avoid the collision. but his hydraulics were damaged. The MiG didn't turn smoothly. It snapped. The nose dipped violently, and beneath them, rising out of the mist of the Chinese countryside, was a tall, industrial smokestack. The impact. Physics is unforgiving. Colonel Volkov saw the smokestack too late. He tried to pull up, but the damaged hydraulics of his MiG-15 betrayed him. The controls were mushy, unresponsive. The left wing of the MiG clipped the top of the brick chimney. It wasn't a graze. It was a catastrophic collision at 500 miles per hour. The wing sheared off instantly. The MiG began a violent, cartwheeling disintegration. It slammed into the muddy field beyond the factory, tumbling like a fiery ragdoll, shedding parts, engine, tail, cockpit, until it finally came to rest in a massive crater of burning jet fuel. Preacher pulled up hard, his saber screaming over the fireball, the heat washing over his canopy. "Splash 2, Preacher whispered. His voice was shaking. Splash 2. The escape. He was alive. He had won. But he was in deep trouble. He was 5 miles inside Chinese territory. The anti-aircraft flak was getting heavier. Black puffs of smoke were blossoming all around him, rocking the jet. Thump! A piece of shrapnel tore through his right wing. The fuel gauge flickered. "Time to go," Preacher said. He banked the saber hard to the south, aiming for the Yalu River. He stayed low, hugging the deck, flying so close to the ground that the shockwave of his passing blew the leaves off the trees. He crossed the river back into North Korea, then back into friendly airspace. When he finally landed at Kimpo Air Base, his fuel tanks were dry. He taxied to the revetment and shut down the engine. He sat there for a long time. The canopy was open, but he didn't move. He just listened to the ticking of the cooling metal. His crew chief, Sergeant Miller, no relation to the pilot, climbed up on the wing. He saw the pilot's face. Pale, drained, eyes like 2 burnt holes in a blanket. "Captain?" the sergeant asked. "You okay?" We heard some crazy chatter on the radio." Preacher unclipped his mask. He looked at the sergeant. "Check the gun camera," Preacher rasped. "And bring me a bottle of whiskey." The inquiry. The debriefing room was silent. Colonel Iron Mike, the wing commander, stood at the front. He had the gun camera footage reel in his hand. He looked like he wanted to scream, but didn't know who to scream at. "Captain Thorne," the colonel said quietly. "Do you know what you did?" "Yes, sir." "You crossed the border into China. That is a court-martial offense. That is an international incident." "Yes, sir." "And you did it," the colonel continued, "after recovering from GLOC, engaging 2 superior enemy aircraft and running out of ammo?" "Yes, sir." The colonel sighed. He looked at the film reel. Then he looked at the intelligence officer. "Play it." The room watched. They saw the first kill, Yuri's MiG disintegrating. They saw the Hail Mary, the vertical spray of bullets. They saw the dive, the chase, the river, and then the screen went black. The camera had stopped recording when the ammo ran out. "It stops," the colonel said. "We don't see the second kill. We don't see you crossing the border." Preacher blinked. "Sir." "The film ran out, Captain," the colonel said, his face unreadable. "There is no evidence that you crossed the border. There is no evidence that you shot down Colonel Volkov inside China." The room was dead silent. The pilots looked at each other. "According to this film," the colonel said, tapping the reel, "you engaged 2 bandits south of the Yalu. You splashed one. The other one got away. You returned to base due to low fuel." Preacher understood. The colonel was burying it. He was saving Preacher's career and preventing a war. "However," the colonel added, leaning in close, "if you ever turn your radio off again, I will ground you for life. Do you understand me?" "Loud and clear, sir." The ghost. The official report stated that Captain Elias Thorne shot down 1 MiG-15 on October 12, 1952. But the rumors spread. Intelligence intercepts from the Soviet side told a different story. They spoke of a madman who rose from the dead. They spoke of Colonel Volkov, their greatest ace, who had flown into a smokestack trying to escape a demon. The Russian pilots started calling the F-86 with the Sunday Punch nose art by a new name. The Sleeper. They said that if you see him drifting, if you see him head down in the cockpit, run. Do not wake him up. Epilogue. The Bar. 20 years later. A bar in San Diego. Preacher was retired now. Gray hair, a little slower, nursing a beer. A young Navy pilot, fresh out of flight school, was sitting next to him. He was bragging about a mock dogfight he had won. I pulled 6 GS, the kid said. Nearly blacked out. It was intense. Preacher smiled into his glass. You ever black out, old-timer? The kid asked, looking at Preacher's faded flight jacket. Preacher looked up. His eyes were still sharp. Once, Preacher said. Best nap I ever had. Yeah? The kid laughed. Did you dream of anything? Preacher finished his beer. He set the glass down on the wood. I dreamt I was dead, Preacher said softly. And when I woke up, everyone else was. He stood up, left a tip, and walked out into the night. The end.